Welcome back to CBS This Morning. 2 months ago, back-to-back storms left the city of Jackson, Mississippi without water for weeks. It's just one example of massive problems with the infrastructure meant to keep Americans safe. Wesley Lowery recently visited Jackson for 60 Minutes Plus. Here's what he discovered.
Thousands of Jackson residents like Gaynor were left for weeks without the most vital public utility and the most basic human necessity. Cars lined up for miles at water and food distribution sites set up across the city. When the American Society of Civil Engineers released its most recent report card, Mississippi received a D for the quality of both its drinking water and wastewater infrastructure. But when we traveled to Jackson last month, we found much more than a water crisis, but the story of a city and a nation still grappling with the shaky foundation upon which it was constructed.
How often is there a crew out here digging into someone's yard like this?
This is pretty regularly.
Pretty regular.
Unfortunately, when you look at,
Here we go.
Charles Williams is Jackson's public works director, and it's his job to manage the city's infrastructure. It's thankless work, even under normal circumstances, much less amid a wave of winter weather atypical this deep in the South.
When you had the first winter storm come in, you were kind of like, well, you know, maybe we'll be okay. But the second one that came in, and on that Wednesday, the 17th, all bets were off. And it was like the system just crashed like a computer.
60 Minutes Plus correspondent Wesley Lowery joins us now. Wesley, good morning. Thanks for being here. The first question, why has the infrastructure in Jackson been allowed to deteriorate to this point?
You know, it's interesting, and it's not just a Jackson story. It's a story of many cities across the country, right? We have to remember that many of our cities, their physical skeletons were built decades ago, in some cases for populations that were much larger than the ones today. And when you look at Jackson specifically, this was a city that was once almost 250,000 people, but following federally mandated school desegregation, saw massive demographic shifts within the city itself. A lot of white flight out to suburbs, leaving the people behind, or the people who were left behind, tended to be poorer, tended to be blacker, fewer businesses, smaller tax base, and so suddenly you have this big city built for many more people that is being supported with the resources of a much smaller tax base. And so you can see how very quickly suddenly the city doesn't have the resources to keep up with what it would take. You know, and infrastructure is not particularly sexy. You know, let's spend an extra $1 billion on water or bridges, right? It's something that seems easy to kick from one year to the next, and suddenly you look up and it's been 30 years.
Wes, this is Michelle here. I wonder, you look at the big picture of Jackson, the big picture across the United States, which communities are most impacted by this?
Of course, you know, there is a close correlation between race and economics and whether or not you have clean water in the United States of America. We were talking to experts at the U.S. Water Alliance and elsewhere, and they said that the biggest determinant of whether or not you have clean water in America is whether you're black or not. That there are millions of people who don't have access to clean drinking water, to clean sewage and wastewater, and that correlates very directly to where you live in a city, where you live in the country, and we know that those types of geographic choices and geographic realities were not something that were coincidences. Over the course of our recent history, decisions have been made about who gets to live where and how they're serviced. And so there really is an issue of racial equity here. We all think about Flint and the conversation about the lead in the water there, but Flint is a story that is not unique to one particularly bad place, or what's happening in Jackson is not unique to one particular city. This is something that's playing out for millions of Americans across the country.
With about 20 seconds, how will President Biden's infrastructure plan impact what we're seeing?
So they're still working out the hyper-specific details, but one thing that's important is that what President Biden is proposing is, in fact, a generational investment in infrastructure. Again, infrastructure is not particularly sexy, and so folks don't get as excited necessarily as they might for something else. But that said, he's aiming to spend an amount of money, if he can get it through Congress, that really is unprecedented in our modern history in terms of the infrastructure, the skeleton of our country. And so it's going to be really interesting to see if that's something he can get through Washington, and how that might change things in communities like Jackson.
Wesley Lowery, we thank you. Looking forward to that report. And you can watch Wesley's full report on 60 Minutes Plus this Sunday on the Viacom CBS streaming service, Paramount Plus.